we all, yourself included, have a duty to research, collect, and share this information, because it has been a critical part of the culture of Toronto. Toronto became the proving ground for a lot of hip hoppers out of New York.
Yeah,
And Toronto was the
yeah,
first international tour that a lot of these young hip hoppers
it's
did.
true.
Round one, male MCs. No holds barred battling here. Toronto's Michi Me won easily over Sugar Love from Brooklyn.
That speaks volumes. And then, it gets harder after that because I think if you fast forward to the present times, I think the significance of Drake and The Weeknd being two of the most dominant artists globally.
Welcome to Worldwide Entertainment TV Network and its Toronto series. And you don't want to miss this historic piece of video as this weekend kicks off the Canada Black Music Archives Little Jamaica Music History Walking Tour. This free guided tour begins at 2353 Dufferin Street and ends at Marley Avenue. You can attend for free July 13th and 27th, August 3rd and 17th, and September 7th and 21st. Here is our exclusive interview with the executive director of the event, Phil Vassell.
The reason we ended up launching this project, and I say we because my wife and I were involved in some previous things that are somewhat related. By that I mean Donna, her name is Donna McCurvin. Donna and I published a magazine called Word Magazine for 20 years. And Word
Yeah,
Magazine was the leading black culture magazine here in Toronto, covering the whole gamut: music, film, theater, visual arts. And, um, it wasn't just the arts, which we were
yeah,
personally interested in, but music was about 50% of it. And so music brought people together. We knew that by leaps and stretches in a way that I would argue some of the other artistic practices don't.
yeah,
So we, after 20 years, said to ourselves, what are we going to do next when we stopped publishing? Because the industry became harder as the internet grew.
yeah,
And we decided to um, get into music festival production. So we created three different festivals, music festivals. The first was the Toronto Urban Music Festival, here in Toronto, of course, the
yeah,
Irie Music Festival, and the Saga City Music Festival. All
yeah,
of those were, under our leadership, and they serve very different markets. And I knew we had to separate them when one year I wanted to bring someone from Parliament Funkadelic to
yeah.
the Toronto Urban Music Festival, and she was a lead singer for Brides of Funkenstein, one of the spin-off groups of Parliament Funkadelic. And
Okay.
she was an amazing singer, but the rest of the lineup consisted of young people who were into hip hop and R&B.
Yeah,
And because she wasn't the headliner, she was performing before the headliner was supposed to go on. Got, impatient, didn't want to hear her, and was booing her off the stage.
yeah,
And I had to go backstage to console her. And I'm thinking, man, here I am trying to introduce people to a slice of the history. Most people don't know that George Clinton of Parliament Funkadelic lived in Toronto for a while,
Oh,
and
I don't know that too.
his daughter attended York University. You
Yeah.
know, a number of the other band members also lived here. So I have always been interested in the history of music. So I thought I was bringing something, some knowledge to the public that they would appreciate. Well,
Yeah.
it taught me that, they had no time for that. And so after that, I realized that I can't have one festival that deals with hip hop and R&B, reggae, um, soca, Latin music, and put it all in one.
Yeah.
Afrobeat. You know, not many people's tastes is that wide or that expansive. That's when we decided we need to separate the Irie Music Festival from the Toronto Urban Music Festival. And then those events were able to continue and be separate and distinct. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm coming from, going back then in 1991. And in about 2008, I think, is when we stopped producing the Toronto Urban Music Festival, but continued with Irie Music Festival for like 20 years and brought some big names through, um, Third World, Toots and the Maytals, Fab Five, Byron Lee and the Dragonaires, Freddie
Yeah.
McGregor.
Yeah. One
Uh,
year we were out there. The whole day of in Mississauga, right?
we had it first in Toronto, and
Toronto.
then we went to Mississauga.
Yeah.
Um, we also featured some big soca artists as well. Bungie Garland, we had him twice.
Yeah.
Fayan, his wife was a pretty dynamic performer as well, and we brought other soca artists into the mix. That's how the Mississauga version of the Irie Music Festival became different from what we had in Toronto. There
Yeah.
was an equal focus on reggae one day and soca the next. So the festival grew. We had it for 20 years. The pandemic happened, and then we decided, you know what? Um, Things have to change because we weren't going to produce a festival in the middle of the pandemic, which technically lasted for 5 years. So at that point, we sat down, my wife and I said, what's next? And we were talking about archiving all that information of Word Magazine and the festivals into one big entity. But as we thought about it, we said, you know what? Music was a leading piece, and music is still the leading piece. So why don't we focus on music? And then we started looking around, looking if there's anybody documenting that music history piece
Yeah.
anywhere in the form of an archive. And we discovered that, other than Northside Hip Hop, which was put together by Mark Campbell, who's now a friend,
Yeah. I
there
hear
was
that.
nobody looking at, jazz and blues and all the other black music, formats, genres. And we said, why not us? And so in 2020, we started what became the Canada Black Music Archives as a way of documenting the history of Canadian black artists, many of whom don't get any love or appreciation.
Yeah.
And many times, if you ask people to name us some of these artists, they'd stop at Oscar Peterson, Cardi, Drake, The Weeknd, and of course Maestro.
Yeah.
So to me, that was hugely problematic because we were able to go back to the late 1800s to talk about black groups that was here in Toronto, and bring it all the way forward to now, where two of the biggest artists in the world are Drake and The Weeknd. So that history is what we wanted to share with the public. You know, that we're not newcomers to this space. We've been here for a long time. We've made valuable contributions. A lot of those contributions were hidden because nobody wrote about it. But just because you don't write about it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. Mentioned, I didn't know it went back to late 1800s. Because my dad was a part of the first Calypso King of Toronto event when they were doing the soca back in, like, I think it was 1980.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, he was one of the first Juno nominees too for the genre.
What's his name?
Vibrator.
Vibrator. Okay.
He had signed a deal with Charlie Records that was on Sparrow. That's the label that had Sparrow music pushing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we try to we on our end we try to, like, speak with those unknown voices too, and let them tell their story and keep the history.
We have to. I've been lucky enough to know, a fair number of people from my days publishing Word Magazine for 20 years, like I said.
Yeah.
And so you get to meet people, you get to write about some of these artists in the publication. And so when we said this is the way we're going to go, we started off with something ridiculous like over 5,000 reviews that we had done over the 20 years with Word Magazine.
It's a lot.
Some of them never even got into the publication because we didn't have space.
Yeah.
So we had that to begin with, and we had all the people who wrote about the music from the 60s all the way down to where we are now. And they got excited about the fact that somebody cared enough to want to document these stories.
Yeah.
So it's been like that. We continued to do that. One of the things that we just completed is, well, two things. The first one is we last year started the Little Jamaica Music History Walking Tour.
Yeah.
And that walking tour takes you through to about 17 or 18 stops in Little Jamaica. Little Jamaica is bordered by Keele Street in the west and Marley in the east. But our journey, our tour took you from Dufferin over to Marley. And, we had done the research of a lot of these untold artists, is what I'm going to call them.
Yeah.
Who made a significant contribution to the point where, at one point, Toronto was the second largest producer of reggae music in the world outside of Kingston.
Yes. I know. I've been told that. I've done stuff with King Culture.
We've worked with King Culture as well.
Yeah, trying to document stuff with him. Yeah, he was actually showing clips to when they did the Reggae Lane original.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I documented that, and Leroy Sibbles and those things like that too.
Yeah, there's a lot of great names that were part of the Little Jamaica music history.
Yeah.
Leroy Sibbles, Jackie Matu, Jay Douglas, Nana McLean, Carlene Davis lived here for a time and had some success here, and people like Johnny Osborne, who lived here for 10 years before he moved back, and Stranger Cole was a part of this as well. So when you look at it, there's so many talented musicians that passed through what we now call Little Jamaica,
Yeah.
that were part of that whole explosion of music and culture to the point where I think they gave birth to a lot of businesses. There's so many record stores along Little Jamaica. There were other stores where you could go and shop. Um, there
Yeah,
were
ironically, yeah, just 2 days ago, I was interviewing another artist, a hip hop artist from the Oakwood area, Oakwood
yeah,
and Vaughn
yeah,
area.
yeah,
And while I was looking up things, I saw a picture with Bob Marley visiting one of the stores around there too.
yes.
Yeah,
Bob Marley couldn't come to Toronto without dropping in on Eglinton
yeah,
because that's where the action was. You know
yes,
what I mean? And that's where he was going to find his people. So it historically, we think that Little Jamaica should be designated a cultural district to acknowledge the history of musicians and artists that went through that neighborhood. Lillian Allen was a part of that neighborhood as well. She's considered the queen of dub poetry and is now the poet laureate of the city of Toronto.
yeah,
And there are a number of others who have made their mark because there was a community like this that helped to sustain them, despite not getting radio play, for example. You know, we didn't have the internet back in the day where you could say, well, let me bypass radio stations um, to get my music out there. You had to go to the clubs. You
yeah,
had to get DJs wanting to play your music. Um, if you were lucky enough, you might perform at one of the Caravana events. I remember Aishan People, one of the first reggae bands in town, where Johnny Osborne was a lead singer, was performing over the island,
yeah,
playing reggae music as part of that. Fab Five was one of the groups that came here in 1967 to perform at the first Caravana. So we have
oh,
tons of history, man. The Merry Man was part of that as well. You know, from Barbados and lots of other people who have
yeah,
throughout the years um, came through and represented, you know, their music and their culture.
yeah. I didn't even know about the Fab Five at the first Caravana.
Yeah, it was. I
That's
saw
crazy.
some photos recently of them on stage.
Yeah. So with stops like Jimmy Wisdom's Barbershop and Reggae Lane, how did you select the locations and the setup for your event?
That's a good question. I think, well, Jimmy Wisdom Barbershop is foundation. Why? He had a shop there for over 40 years and was foundation in Little Jamaica.
Yeah,
And Bob and Jimmy um, were a duo that had their start in Jamaica, came here for what was supposed to be greener pastures, right? You know, I think
yeah,
they were from the Montego Bay area, but they came here hoping for bigger and better things as musicians. And, you know, what they found wasn't the most welcoming environment for reggae music or R&B that they
yeah,
sang back then. And so Jimmy talks about going to barbering school and learning a trade, as they say, and started his barbershop.
yeah,
And there were other musicians like Lucky, who was an amazing bass player, who went to barbering school as well and became a barber while they moonlighted on the weekends as musicians.
yeah. I also know the barbershop's not there, but the barbershop that was right on the side of Reggae Lane, the
Yeah,
parking lot. I know he was one of the first at the Calypso King events too, because my dad was telling me about a beginner.
yes.
Yeah, his name was Beginner.
Well, this. I'm learning about this from you now. I didn't know
Yeah,
about beginner, right? And
yeah,
I'm saying that history, man, like it's like pulling a thread, and then you realize that oh, this person was here as well. So
Yeah.
going back to your question, we did a lot of research, spoke to a lot of people, and then realized that we had like a treasure trove of stories and information. And some buildings like Jimmy Wisdom's barbershop, which is still a barbershop, but it's got a
Yeah.
new name now, he was foundation. A lot of bands rehearsed in the basement of Jimmy Wisdom's barbershop
Yeah.
that he and his wife worked out of. And places like Raps. Rap was involved in the music industry, but he also innovated late night eating on Eglinton.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He realized that being in the music business, a lot of guys would come home, 3 o'clock in the
Finish
morning,
up. Yeah.
and them not have nothing to eat.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So they would go. He would start this whole idea of putting out a jerk barbecue pan. So as you're driving or walking down there, that smell is wafting through the air, right?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
smelling the food and you're hungry, you're gonna pull up and get some food
Exactly.
and go home. So now the city of Toronto is talking about a late night economy, and we can see the roots of that was part of what drove Raps when he created a store where you could
Yeah.
get takeout food. You know, there were a few restaurants in Chinatown where you could go late night and eat as well. But again, you see how we have contributed to the economy and
And
the music industry.
also gonna ask you, but you kind of answered it, how the Caribbean and African diaspora has shaped the Canadian music scene for the different generations over the years.
It's here's the thing: the research that we found, wherever you have significant numbers of the black community, you're much more likely to find musicians coming out of that community.
Yeah.
Every ethnic group you can find, usually when they go to a new country, they go to wherever their community is. And in the 70s, over 100,000 Jamaicans migrated to Canada. Okay, if you're new to the city, someone's going to tell you about Little Jamaica. Someone's going to
Sure.
tell you can get food up there, you can get
Yeah.
clothes up there. There are barbers who will make you a suit. You know what I mean? And some musicians actually, when they come to Toronto, they'd come ahead of time and they'd go see a couple of barbers on Eglinton to get, a suit that they
Yeah.
can look just so, just right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, you're coming to a town where they're members of your community you want to look good. You want to
That's true.
sound good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So some of these barbers are telling me that guys would call with their measurements ahead of time so that once they get here, all they're doing is the fitting
Yeah.
to fine tune things here and there. But come showtime, man, they'd be
Ready to
looking
go.
like $1 million. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that's part of the fun of researching this history of Little Jamaica. And like I said, we have about 17, 18 stops
Yeah.
along the road. Sunshine Sound. Sunshine is one of the foundational artists, foundational
Yeah.
business owners in the music industry.
Yeah. I've actually worked with Ryan Lord, who was one of the founding guys for it. And he
Yes.
always says the people don't know the history with Sunshine Song Crew. They were there
Sunshine.
before Ron Nelson and everybody.
Oh, without a doubt, without a
Yeah.
doubt. One of the most famous clubs that people are just now learning about and I remember going to as a teenager, is Hagerman's. And Hagerman's was a club behind City Hall.
Yeah.
And, it's a late night club. Nobody's going there at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock kind of thing.
Yeah.
But Hagerman's had the best sound system in the city. And I
Yeah.
remember going there, and they would play, I forget the name of the artist who made this song, but it's rock, roll, bounce, skate, and it had that wicked bass line
Yeah.
that when he cranks it, man, you felt that in your body if you're close to
Yeah.
the speaker. But those are great times, and he is one of the forerunners, not just in terms of having several clubs, but he also trained a lot of people who went on to become DJs and club owners themselves. And
Yeah.
he's just a guy who, I try to give as much props as possible, because I know him and I've worked with him when I was producing the Irie Music Festival.
Yeah.
And he's just an amazing dude. And, he doesn't like the attention, but I think he's foundation, as
Yeah.
they say in the streets.
Yes. So, how can everyday Canadians or global supporters contribute or engage with your organization?
Well, that's easy. We are now doing the Music History Walking Tour. We have the website. It's called thecbma.com. And we're a small nonprofit organization punching above our weight. But we have documented hundreds of stories of Black Canadian musicians on the website.
Yeah.
So it's a historical database, if you will, um, that teaches people about the contributions of Black Canadian musicians to this country. So it's very important. There is a movie, I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, go see it, called Hidden Figures. And Hidden Figures is about 6 African American women
Yes.
who were mathematicians who helped the USA NASA program get to space. And
See me.
nobody knew about their contributions
Yeah.
until maybe the last 20 years. And yet they were so instrumental in helping at a time when there were no computers to do the kind of work that they were doing. But nobody knew their names. Nobody knew about the contributions. And I feel like, this story is very important because it's quite similar to the experience of most Black musicians here.
Yeah.
You know, um, Toronto in the late 60s and early 70s, most people don't know, was an R&B town. But where's that history? Nobody's documented that history. And we're saying our job as a digital archive is to capture some of the musicians that were an important part of that history. And we
Yeah.
don't just want to do that in Toronto. Toronto's our hometown, of course.
Yeah.
But we also want to visit other major Canadian cities, like Montreal, for example,
Yeah.
like Halifax, like Vancouver, where we know there's a strong history of Black musicians who lived in those neighborhoods and created great music. Sometimes they would play a lifetime without getting a record deal. So the odds of you knowing about their music become smaller and smaller. So as researchers, we're basically saying, let's dig. Let's go talk to people in those cities and
Yeah.
find out who these players are, who these musicians are, and elevate their contributions so others who don't know can find out. And the walking tour is a great example of bringing that history to life. One of the things we do with the walking tour is at the end of each tour going forward, we will have a local musician performing for about 15 minutes to give people a real life experience of
Yeah.
someone who has a connection to Little Jamaica.
Yeah.
So that's how you bring the history alive.
Yes.
You know, that's how you show people that, blacks have made a significant contribution to this country in so many different ways. Our focus is on the music, and we think the music connects everybody. The music is a universal language, and so that's what we're focused on doing.
Yeah.
In the later part of August, we're taking a trip to Montreal to do some more research, and then we will go to Halifax. We will go to BC to gather some of
Yeah.
that research, because this is a history that belongs to all of us. But more important, I think the community itself needs to understand the contributions that others who went before them did. I think
Yeah.
some famous person, it might have been Marcus Garvey, who says a people without a knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. Because we had a hip hop exhibition at the City of Toronto Archives back in February as part of our Black History Month presentation.
Yeah.
And we researched that history and presented some of the highlights of that history there. The exhibit lasted for about a month. We also brought in Professor Mark Campbell, who's a professor at U of T Scarborough,
Yeah.
and he gave a lecture. Um, I think it was called "From the Screw-Faced Capital to the Six,"
That,
right?
that's
He documented, some of that history and spoke about the early years. And one of the things we did was we were able to showcase um, some work done by the sister, Anessa, who made it her business to pull together um, as many flyers and posters as she could get her hands on from, I think, the 70s on up,
yeah.
to give you a sense of the history of some of the things that happened here. For instance, one of the things that Mark spoke about in his presentation is that he says Toronto became the proving ground for a lot of hip hoppers out of New York.
Yeah.
And Toronto was the
Yeah.
first international tour that a lot of these young hip hoppers
It's
did.
true. It's true.
So
That's
you
how.
can't.
That's how. Yeah. That's how. They were surprised when Michie Me would battle rap the artist that came over, and then she impressed KRS One and Dougie Fresh and those artists.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's a part of the history. But again, if you don't document it, it dies with the handful of people who might still be around to remember that.
Uh,
And we're saying, no, that's not good enough. We all, yourself included, have a duty to research, collect, and share this information, because it has been a critical part of the culture of Toronto, and you can't talk about Toronto without talking about the influence of black music in Toronto.
yeah.
So it's work that is necessary for all of us, man. And we're saying we're going to do our part in doing the research and the documentation of that, and we're going to share it because the Canada Black Music Archives, the CBMA, is a national digital archives that is pulling that information from across Canada and sharing that information. You can see bios, you can see photos, you can see video clips if they're there.
Yeah.
You can see other things. You can listen to some of their music on Spotify, for example. So these are ways that we're trying to bring that history closer to the public.
Yeah.
And another big accomplishment for us is that we recently produced an exhibition which is on now at Archives of Ontario. We have over 20 artists that are featured in what we're calling Black Then Muted Melodies, and it features the different genres of black music. A lot of them, anyways, over 10 different genres of black music, from house to rap to soca to reggae to jazz to blues to gospel. We're giving people a sense as to that history, and I would say, without bragging, it's the most impressive work that we have done to date. Now, they have said we'd like to host this exhibition for the next 10 months. So it is taking place at Archives of Ontario on York University campus. And now we're also being told that this information is important information that will supplement some of the expected curriculum changes that is going to take place. It should have happened as of September. The provincial government has delayed it by a year. But we're basically putting it out there so people can understand this history is long, this history is deep, and there are some amazing artists, out there that maybe you don't know about, but it's worth making the trip. It's on York University campus, and I guarantee you're going to learn something about this rich history of Black Canadian musicians. All of the artists that are featured, by the way, are artists who have lived here in Ontario.
Yeah, that's good.
So we're putting in the work. We're looking for other people who are putting in the work, like yourself, and saying, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to sustain it, you go together.
Who would you say are the three most impactful artists in the history after seeing the whole archives that you've seen?
Oh man, that's a really, really difficult one.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is this, that the Ball family, who migrated from the USA in the 1800s, the late 1800s, is the first documented group. They were a choir, a family that was a choir, and they had sold out shows back in the day. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
And we were able to document some of that history and have a member of the Ball family, 6 generations Ball family, perform at the launch of this exhibit. So the Ball family, having been one of the first, you got to give them props for doing that.
I'm glad you're mentioning names like that, because there's foundation of things that came before the popular names right now. So
Yes.
That you mentioned there.
But there's a connection, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
The other one I would say, because he is one of the top jazz musicians in the world, is Oscar Peterson. And even Duke Ellington was raving about Oscar Peterson back in the day.
Yeah.
And Duke Ellington is one of the most significant artists in the jazz world. So,
I've heard of him,
what does that then make Oscar if, one of the greatest arranger and pianist says that about him. So I think that speaks volumes. And then, it gets harder after that, because I think if you fast forward to the present times, I think the significance of Drake and The Weeknd being 2 of the most dominant artists globally.
Yeah, is that a long run?
Okay, tells you that, the roots runs deep, where these two artists, coming up around the same time, give or take, and having the kind of impact, global impact that they've had, I think you can't minimize it. But also, there are a number of other artists that, I don't think you can stop at three. I just gave you four.
Yeah.
But I think that to me is one way that we can acknowledge those who came before, the current generation.
Yeah.
Maestro is now in the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. And that speaks volumes because rap music was seen as an outcast.
Yeah.
Radio stations didn't want to touch it. And this is in our era. We're not talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
you know,
It'd be
before
hard
that.
it'd be hard for some current rappers in the city to even fathom that they see it so prevalent now, but it wasn't always like that.
It wasn't always like that, so we've made some strides, and, Toronto has become a destination spot, um, going back to the 70s where artists from the States would come here and record.
Yeah.
Some stayed back, right? But now, in terms of the population base, Toronto is the third or fourth largest city in North America. And so every significant artist that is on tour has to stop in Toronto.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't have to go to Buffalo anymore. And I grew up going to Buffalo to see Rick James. I grew up going to Buffalo to see Parliament Funkadelic, and others. Now I just got to drive downtown,
Yeah.
jump in an Uber, and I'm seeing some of the top artists in the world in Toronto.
Yeah.
So we've seen growth. A lot has changed. As Martin Luther King famously said, we ain't where we used to be, but we ain't where we want to be. So the journey continues, man. The one in Eglinton, these are several walking tours that we're doing.
Yeah.
There's 8 of them. You can go online to the cbma.com and look up Little Jamaica Music History Walking Tour. So we have all the dates there. Coming up shortly, we have on the 13th of July, we have our next walking tour. And I think there's like 25 or more people that have signed up for that
Yeah.
tour. There's still an opportunity for you to sign up if you want to come and check it out. But we have other dates as well. I think on the 27th, we have another one. They're normally on Sundays, but with Caravana coming in the first week of August, we have one on a Thursday, and then on the Sunday, because what we found last year is a lot of people who come through to Caravana want to build an itinerary of things they'd like to do while they're here.
Yeah.
Okay, the parade is obviously the biggest thing going, but they want to take in some additional Toronto vibes, and the walking tour has gotten a number of people who signed up because they want to learn about the history of, Little Jamaica in terms of the music production and the artists that came out of there. Leroy Sibbles sings the praises of Little Jamaica. I had an opportunity to interview Leroy Sibbles. It's in a podcast online. We've got about a dozen podcasts there. So if you want to, get a window on what some of these artists from back in the day have to say about their time, it's worth the effort. It's worth the opportunity. But from 11 to 1 o'clock on Sunday, we have a walking tour. And then at the end of the walking tour, we have a performer. Papa Levy is going to be performing for about 15 minutes at what used to be Monica's Hair and Cosmetics. It's now Monica's Gallery. It's become a gallery and cultural center that they're working on. And we think it's great that you can go after the tour, have a seat, relax a little bit, and hear about, hear something from, a new generation artist. And also to learn more about the work that we're putting in as the Canada Black Music Archive.
Okay, so thanks for coming on and spreading the word and informing people on the history, which is important. And now they could know a place where they could go do some research and find out about all the musicians that contributed to the whole legacy for the city.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to share it. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and
Yeah,
we have work to do, right?
yeah.
So each one, reach one, teach one.
Teach one.
You know what I mean? So that's how we do it.